Japan's still relatively new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, had every reason to believe that US President Trump would be a key ally in the face of China pushing its weight around in the region. After all, she was aligned to a good degree with the political right. She was following faithfully in the footsteps of Shinzo Abe, who Trump had gotten on with and generally respected. And Japan is strongly aligned with the Trump administration that was urging the nations of Southeast Asia to line up with it rather than with China. So, when one of the first things she did on taking office was to enrage Beijing by saying that a Chinese attack on Taiwan would be an existential threat, one that would fully justify Japan deploying its military, she hoped to get President Trump's solid backing. Based on his pronouncements and the administration's public strategy, that would have been a reasonable hope, if you overlooked the fact that Trump has zero track record of standing alongside partners or allies, indeed seems not to understand what an ally might even be, or at least not to understand that it might involve a two-way benefit, rather than just America taking more generously than it does even from others. And so it seems, having provoked the storm, Japan is left urging the United States to give it more support, but so far to no avail. Shigeo Yamada, Japan's ambassador in Washington, has reportedly asked the Trump team to step up its public support for Tokyo. After all, the US ambassador in Japan, George Glass, had told reporters just last month that Trump and his government, quote, have her back, and suggesting their support was unshakable. Well, unshakable, but apparently not stirred. China has been hitting Japan with economic retaliation, such as banning the import of Japanese seafood and threatening more to come. This weekend, Japan reported that Chinese warplanes had locked their radars onto Japanese fighter jets southeast of Okinawa, an extremely provocative move for obvious reasons. Takaichi told reporters this: Japan has strongly protested to the Chinese side, and we firmly requested measures to prevent recurrence. We will respond calmly and resolutely. And President Trump said, well, some stuff about Joe Biden being terrible and his new ballroom being terrific. Of course, the worry for Japan is that as they face the growing ambition and military strength of the regional superpower, and whereas Japan was part of a strong bulwark against that superpower, being simply able to do whatever it wants when standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States along with South Korea, it is much more exposed if the US is AWOL. Now, Europe has cause to be acutely aware that the United States went AWOL pretty much from the very start of the Trump second term. But Japan had expected and hoped that America's interest in pushing back on China, as Trump had done more vigorously in his first term, as they said was a priority over Ukraine, that would make it a more engaged presence in the region. And maybe it is, but always on Trump's terms, not theirs. And as the new national security strategy published 2 days ago made clear, pretty much always from the point of view of America making money, not engaging with geopolitics. Hence why the US has been downgrading China from being a superpower military threat to being an economic rival, who could, if handled properly, be a major economic opportunity. So while Japan is the butt of aggressive Chinese rhetoric as a result of Takaichi's comments, Trump is said to have told his team, including the team that drafted the security strategy by the way, not to take any actions that could jeopardize the trade deal he outlined with Xi Jinping back in October. Takaichi had specifically said that Japan would aid US forces if they were attacked while defending Taiwan from China. Christopher Johnston, a former top White House Japan expert, back from the days when they employed country experts in the White House, he told the Financial Times this was the clearest statement ever made by a Japanese Prime Minister about Japan's obligations to the US during a Taiwan contingency. Setting aside whether it was wise to make that statement publicly, it was one that Washington should have embraced, while instead it was met with silence. Having made reference to Whether it was wise for her to have said what she did, it's worth remembering that Trump's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Elbridge Colby, had pushed Japan to make clear what role it would play if the US and China went to war over Taiwan. She was literally answering the question she'd been asked. Now, maybe if Takaichi had also said she was nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize or sending him a golden something. But then wait, yes, Takaichi already did that, at least the first one, over a month ago. Still not enough, apparently, when it involves taking courageous action in the face of someone big enough to fight back. Trump was asked about the Japanese request for more support, and he waffled on about how his relationships with Takaichi was great, which is what he also said about Xi Jinping right at the moment China was fighting back hard against his tariffs. He was asked separately about the words of a Chinese consul general in Osaka, Xu Jian, who had said of Takaichi, quote, "If a filthy neck sticks itself in uninvited, we will cut it off without a moment's hesitation." China was not our friend, was it? Laura Ingram asked Trump. A perfect opportunity for him to express support, especially bearing in mind that his friend, her predecessor Shinzo Abe, had been assassinated. Instead, he said, "A lot of our allies are not friends either. Our allies took advantage of our trade more than China did," which the Japanese could be excused for thinking was not to be counted as support of any kind. So it has been left to Japan and Australia to give public reactions to China's incident with the warplanes. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles told a news conference this: "We are deeply concerned by the actions of China in the last 24 hours. And he added that Australia does not want to see any change to the status quo across the Taiwan Straits, even while acknowledging that China is a major trade partner for Australia. We continue to advocate to China about these issues again in a very calm, sensible and moderate way." Now, it's no surprise to the rest of the world that calm, sensible and moderate is not the Trumpian way. But all of those who used to see foreign policy as the one area where countries pursued their national interest in a generally pragmatic way, and hence with little variation with changes of government, they have come to understand that is not the world we live in anymore. Commercial gain is everything, for the United States anyway. Indeed, when confronted with geopolitical action and ambition, for instance on the part of Russia in Ukraine, America is left scratching its head stupidly, unable to understand why promising great economic deals doesn't make that all go away. And speaking of which, Russia's President Putin has been quick to join together with China in the rhetoric against Japan. Beijing and Moscow agreed to, quote, "resolutely uphold the outcomes of World War II victory and to counter any attempts to revive fascism or Japanese militarism." Ah yes, Russia calling other people fascists and Nazis. Where have we heard that before? And as justification for what? Meanwhile, Trump's dismal commercialism with China seems to be not exactly bringing great dividends. Exports from China to the United States have dropped by 26% this year, but that has been compensated for China by trade volumes significantly increasing to Southeast Asian countries, 29% to Indonesia, 23% up to Vietnam, also 19% up to India. If Trump's aim was to turn China into a lucrative trade partner for itself, rather than a geopolitical rival, well, let's just say the approach taken so far isn't exactly delivering the goods, literally. But the mere fact that it seems to be Trump's top priority is enough to get Japan looking warily at its immediate neighbourhood, informed as it now is by the deafening silence at best from the United States, and to be concerned about how this is going to play out for it in the short to medium term. It turns out that being relatively MAGA-friendly and nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, those are no longer enough on their own to turn him into anything that you might recognise as a reliable ally. Who knew? Apart from the rest of the world.